So let's maybe do a couple of minutes of mindfulness of the breath. Could be non-REM breathing, or just counting the breath, or watching the breath. Whatever practice you do that helps you create a little separation between your busy life and spiritual practice. Hopefully they're the same thing, but sometimes not. So let's do that for a couple of minutes. And then we can bring our attention back to the moment, to the present moment. And I'd like to take before we do, I think we should do refuge and bodhicitta prayer. But before we do that, I like to review why we're doing it. It's good for my mind just to launch into these prayers. I mean, I've heard too many people say, "Oh, it's just a lot of empty ritual," and it doesn't have to be. It can be very powerful. So these four lines, the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, are a big deal, because it sets the stage for everything that comes after it. And Lama Yeshe, I had the good fortune of knowing him. I actually took refuge from him back at Kopan back in the day, and in Nepal. And he used to say things like, it's better to do, like, if you're going to meditate for an hour, it's better to spend 59 minutes coming up, generating a altruistic, sincere motivation, and do 1 minute of meditation than the other way around, where you just launch into the meditation without any sincere motivation. So similarly, these prayers, need to think why we're doing them. And so the first two lines are pretty straightforward. It distinguishes someone who's a Buddhist from a non-Buddhist. Someone who's taken refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha versus someone who has taken refuge in Christianity or Islam or Hinduism, or who knows, drug, sex, and rock and roll, whatever people have relied upon have gone to for some sort of support, whatever. And I think, for a Buddhist, this is a big deal. And then the second two lines distinguish people who practice the Mahayana vehicle, or the greater vehicle, the universal vehicle, we like to say, versus people who practice the individual vehicle. That would be mostly Theravada Buddhism, which today you would find it in what used to be called Burma. I guess it's Myanmar now, but Thailand, and Sri Lanka are really the places, maybe a little bit in Laos, but I know Thailand is where I studied Theravada Buddhism for several months on one occasion during my trips. So the motivation for the individual vehicle is to achieve nirvana, which is fantastic. I mean, to be completely free of suffering. I mean, a person who doesn't suffer can be a huge resource for other people. They don't harm others. There's somebody that's safe to be around. They can be an inspiration, and they can guide. They can teach us a lot. The Mahayana vehicle, on the other hand, our motivation, and it's in the beginning, we call it bodhicitta, or the awakening mind. Bodhi means awakening, and chitta means mind. And we call it bodhicitta, the awakening mind, but I like the word bodhicitta because I know what it means, but you can't just say a few words and all of a sudden this attitude of I must become enlightened, I must become a Buddha in order to free all sentient beings from suffering. I mean, that's the gist of it. It's the altruistic intention to become enlightened based on sincere love and compassion. But it's not that easy. And so in the beginning, we have to generate effortful bodhicitta. We'll talk about that in a minute. But going back to the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, so the three things that we need to reflect on, at least momentarily, are number one is sort of fear or dread of living a life with a mind that's basically chaotic and out of control. We're trapped in this circle called samsara. And if we come to terms with that and we realize that it's not good, and it's really it's not where we want to be, and we have some dread of the consequences of living our lives out with that kind of mind. As the Buddha said, all worldlings are deranged. And we're that, and we're worldlings. WORLDLINGS, I think, worldlings. But we're just living for this life. So the first thing is kind of a fear or dread of that kind of living that way. And the second one is confidence or faith in the Buddhas, the enlightened beings, and their teachings, and their and the Dharma, which technically are the realizations in the minds of these beings, and the Sangha. And then there's the Arya Sangha, which are those beings that have realized emptiness. But we use the word quite loosely. It's just our spiritual friends, but there are people that support us on our spiritual journey, and so we think, well, we're taking refuge in the Buddhas, but we're also taking refuge in our potential to become Buddha. We're taking refuge in the Sangha. The Dharma, which are the realizations of those teachings, but also our potential to realize those teachings. So we're taking refuge in our own Buddha nature, the Dharma that we will realize at some point, and then Sangha, not only the Arya Sangha, but the Sangha that we will become, the support we will be able to provide others in the future. So it's really, again, those 2 points, dread and faith or confidence, and then the last one is compassion for ourselves and others. We take refuge and go to bodhicitta. We do this refuge and bodhicitta prayer with those thoughts in mind. So we'll do it 3 times. Let me put my glasses on so I can see. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right, so the title of this class is I think Ravina, she titled it How to Become Your Own Therapist, which, I mean, that's all of the Buddha Dharma, right? Pretty much everything. I'm trying to get my light here so it's a little bit better. Yeah, so it gives you a lot of freedom to talk about just about anything you want to. And so one of the, in Lama Yeshe's book, I mean, maybe some of you, most of you maybe have, certainly you've seen it. It's Rabina's, I think Rabina edited it, but becoming your own therapist, making your mind an ocean, a great little tome. But Lama Yeshe's emphasis has always been that we need to know our own mind. We need to be able to work with our own mind. We need to recognize those states of mind that are harmful and eliminate them, and then cultivate those that are positive. And it sounds so simple, but it's obviously it's not simple. It takes years and even lifetimes to really make a profound shift in our thinking. So the beginning of the spiritual path for Buddhists is something called renunciation, which is and there's some specific meditations that we can do to help cultivate that. But renunciation is just, I like Alex Berzin's translation. He calls it the determination to be free, which implies a couple of things. Number one, we often equate it with having compassion for ourselves, which you hardly ever hear Buddhists talk about having compassion for yourself, but it is a big part of it. And it's the beginning of the path, actually. Realizing that we're in a bad situation called samsara, and we need to have compassion for ourselves and have some determination to be free. But implicit in that is this faith or confidence that we can be free. That it's not, we're not just. In the beginning, it seems hard to even imagine that we could be free of suffering. But as we began to practice and we take little baby steps, and we began to see some improvement in our thinking and in the way we interact with others and our friendships and everything, our relationships with our family and so forth, things began to evolve in a positive way. Then we have some confidence that we can be free. So this determination to be free is really having the beginning of the spiritual path, because we realize we're in a mess and we have confidence that we can get out. It's like the surest way to keep somebody in jail is to not tell them they're in jail. Ever heard that one? Because they have no interest in escaping. So it's only until we have the realization that we are, in fact, in a jail created by our own misguided way of seeing the world and thinking and so forth, then we develop some compassion. May I be free of suffering, and may I be free, this determination to be free. So that's renunciation. Then bodhicitta is again, this altruistic intention to become enlightened based on love and compassion. And it's not really easy to say those words, but it's not easy to have that experience like in your heart, in our heart. And again, it's, for us beginners, we call it effortful bodhicitta. It takes effort to generate it. And then and later on, it becomes effortless. But in the beginning, we have to do a series of contemplations such as equanimity, and there's many different ways to do it, but basically two main ones: the 7 cause and effect, and exchanging self with others. They had these 2 lineages that come from, one comes from Atisha and another one's from Nagarjuna. But these 2 lineages they kind of merge into a series of meditations. And again, developing compassion always, I don't know if Rabina, I'm sure she did talk about this today. Compassion always has, because as a Buddhist, we're talking about not just compassion for the people that are near and dear, but universal living beings. And the first step we have to take is to develop equanimity, where we're not, and usually we do that by imagining a friend, enemy, and a neutral person, and we try to develop an equal regard for the three types of beings. And ordinarily, we cling to the friend, we feel aversion to the enemy, and we feel indifference towards strangers. But we, again, by doing various contemplations, like recalling that in past lives we've all been family, that everybody wants to be happy, nobody wants to suffer, we're all the same, and that these are they're just merely labels, and they're changeable. They're not inherently existent. There's not, that so-called friend may not always be a friend, and the so-called enemy, just a few kind words could become a friend. So we develop this equanimous state of mind. It's like the foundation for developing this attitude of bodhicitta. And then, we can sort of fast track it a little bit. And one of the things that we do is we also, the next step would be to recall the equality, that we're all equal. And the Dalai Lama, when he says he does this meditation on the equality of self and others, he says, imagine there's a sort of imaginary line on the ground, and he's on one side, and on the other side are universal living beings in human form. And he says, and of course, everybody wants to be happy. So, he says, I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. And universal living beings, echo the same thing. We want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. And His Holiness says, now whose happiness is more important? The happiness of one or the happiness of infinite other beings? When we say the word other, there's no limitation to how many beings. It's infinite. And so at the very least, their happiness is as important as ours. So we try to develop this attitude of seeing the equality of self and others, equal in the sense that we all equally want to be happy, and we all equally do not want to suffer. That's, again, this is part of the foundation for developing bodhicitta. And then we reflect on the faults of selfishness, of what we call self-cherishing selfishness, where we through the ignorance, what we call ignorance in Buddhism, is we project a false sense of I. And now, of course, we do exist. We're not saying Buddhism never says we don't exist, but we just don't exist the way we perceive ourselves to exist. We project a false sense of I, and we cling to that sense of I as if it was real. And then we, anything that offends me, or anything that offends me, that's a good way of saying it. We feel aversion toward anything that upsets me. or offends me. Anything that's desirable or delicious, I want. And so the emphasis on this I, and there's this, again, there's this false sense of I, that's beyond what is actually there. What's actually there is a mere body and mind. And in dependence upon the body and mind, we label I, and that's who we are, and nothing more. But we inflate and embellish this sense of I, and gets us into all kinds of trouble. All the delusions, greed, hatred, ignorance, pride, jealousy, 84,000 delusions, they're all come. The tap root for all of these delusions that create the karma that causes the suffering, it's all predicated on this mistake. So we reflect on the false self-cherishing, and it's the cause of all of our problems. And then we reflect on the cause of that it's opposite, and the cause of all happiness is cherishing others. But that's a little bit, we have to put a little thought into that. Cherishing others is the cause of our happiness. And we think about it, if we cherish others, well, if we look at the 10 non-virtues, if we cherish others, we don't kill them. We actually try to save lives. When we cherish others, we don't, we don't steal from them, take what's not been freely given. We practice generosity and so on. There's sexual misconduct, lying, slander, harsh, frivolous talk, greed, hatred, and ignorance. All the 10 non-virtues. The self-centered, self-cherishing mind is the source of it, and their opposites depend on cherishing others. So it's a big deal. This is a hard one, because I think in our culture, we have some, I think many of us anyway, I did for a long time, thought that the greater happiness was taking care of me first. And cherishing others was, well, there were a few I cherished, but not everybody. But the game, the game that we're playing here as Tibetan Buddhist Mahayana practitioners is to cherish others. And the next step is to exchange self-cherishing for cherishing others. And so we're exchanging the attitude, okay? We're exchanging the attitude, which is our default attitude of self-cherishing, for the attitude of cherishing others. And so now, whatever the first thought in our mind, when we get up in the morning, I'm getting up for others. I'm going to go drink a cup of coffee so I can wake up, so I can be of service to others. I'm going to take a shower and get cleaned up and go to work so I can be of service to others. Others. So the focus is like up until now, the focus has always been me, I. And then we're turning the focus outward to others. And then the next step in developing bodhicitta is, a lot of times when we have time, which we don't tonight, is to do Tonglen meditation, where we practice giving and taking, giving happiness and its causes, and taking suffering, taking from others suffering and its causes. And we always start with yourself, by the way. When you do Tonglen, you always want to start with yourself, wishing yourself to be safe, healthy, happy, live with ease, and so on, and that you be free from all your confusions and negativities and obstacles to being happy and so forth. So we do Tonglen, and then we do the next step is what's called the supreme wish. Bob Thurman came to Raleigh one time and gave some teachings. He used the word, he called it the messianic vow, like Messiah. It's never heard it said that way. But, I like the supreme wish kind of resonates with me. And it's this wish that a bodhisattva would have. And it's the wish that we look around and we see that the world is kind of a mess. And the minds of all sentient beings are pervaded by these mistaken perceptions of how we exist and how the world exists. And so we make this decision. We say, I am personally responsible for guiding universal, infinite living beings from wherever they are in terms of suffering, whatever their state of confusion and suffering is now, all the way to supreme enlightenment. And as Lama Zopa says, and we have the determination to do it by myself alone. So we're saying, I take responsibility for the happiness of universal beings and guiding them from confusion to supreme enlightenment by myself alone. And that is the vow of a bodhisattva. That's what a spiritual hero, a spiritual warrior would have that vow. And then of course we when we reflect for just a moment, we realize that, well, who could do that? Who could possibly do that? Well, it would be somebody. I mean, we all have some wisdom, we all have some compassion, we all have some power and skillful means. We all have some of that, even if it's a little bit. But a Buddha is somebody who has perfected all of these qualities of wisdom, compassion, power, and skillful means, and many, many more qualities. That's a Buddha. So that's what we want to become. We want to become a Buddha in order to be able to accomplish what we want for others, which is to guide them. And, from confusion to supreme enlightenment, all the way to supreme enlightenment. And so our motivation is based on genuine, not some sentimental thing, genuine love and compassion. Love is the wish that beings could be happy in its causes, compassion that they be free from suffering in its causes. So based on some feeling for these words, not the words, feeling for the words, love and compassion, then we generate this altruistic intention to achieve supreme enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. And we do this meditation like every day. We need to do this thing. We need to do this, if possible, many times a day, but at least every day, until we begin to be a shift in our heart mind, where things begin to become more open and softer. And so see if you can develop some feeling for these words for just a minute. So you can relax your concentration for a moment. And so I would, okay. Just checking the time. So there's, when you talk about being your own therapist, I can remember Lama Yeshe used to tell, because he was teaching primarily in Kathmandu at Kopan Monastery, and he said, and a lot of the people that were there back when I was there in the late 70s and early 80s, they were, at least when they came there were a lot of more hippies, gone there for the drug scene or to go trekking in the Himalayas. And Lama Yeshe used to say, we need to go mind trekking. We need to explore our mind. I remember I committed to do a retreat, and it was one back in those days where most people who were trying to become serious Dharma practitioners did it. I remember this friend of mine, his name was Tom Shemansky, and he said, he said, look, when you're going to do a retreat, you shouldn't, you shouldn't tell people, say anything about it. Otherwise, it creates obstacles for yourself. So you don't need to go say, well, I'm going to do such and such a retreat, and go into a big deal about it. He said, if anybody asks you what your retreats, you can say, well, yeah, I'm going to go to, in my case, Lama Zopa. We were in Dharamsala. No, actually, we were in Bodh Gaya. And Lama Zopa told me, for this retreat, he said, you should go to Sri Lanka. And I went, Sri Lanka? Really? But I did. I went to Sri Lanka to do the retreat. But as my friend Tom said, if somebody asks you what the retreat is, you just say, I'm going to look at my mind. I'm going to explore my mind. And that's, I use those terms to describe. I never told people, Tom was, he knew what I was going to do, but I never talked about it in any other terms other than just I was going to explore my mind. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. I learned an awful lot. As my big aha from that, and just about any other retreat I've done, is that my mind is a mess. And but I can work with it. It's actually, as Lama Zopa said, with effort and sincere effort over time, we can begin to shape our mind, and we can begin to become the people or the person that we want to become. And so, I really felt like I didn't feel like I had any great spiritual realizations. But then I thought, well, maybe that's a pretty good realization that I have a lot of work to do, and that the mind is pretty much chaotic. Because when I would sit down for a session, I had no idea what demons or goddesses or whatever in between there was were going to be visiting me during that session. It was always just sit and do the practice, and then deal with what arises. And it was an amazing experience in that way. And it gets back to just our day-to-day life, being around therapists. We have to become mindful. We have to become mindful not only of the content that's arising in our mind, but as, again, a monk, or at least a former monk, his name's Thupten Pinde. He's, you may know him. He lives in Santa Cruz, and he's still, he was for over 20 years. I mean, he was a monk, and he's great, very knowledgeable. And he said there are 3 or 4 things that we need to be mindful of. We need to be mindful of emptiness. Of course, if we're practicing deity yoga, we need to be mindful of ourselves as being the deity. We need to be mindful of emptiness, of bodhicitta, and certainly of our guru. Those are just some of the things we need to be mindful of. But and we use the term mindfulness, at least in the mind and mental factor teachings. It's used we think of it in terms of recollection. Like, we need to recall these things that we need to be mindful of. Again, if we're practicing deity yoga, ourselves as the deity, the emptiness, compassion, bodhicitta, our guru, and so on. We need to recollect these things, but we also use mindfulness in terms of being aware of the content of what arises in our mind, and to be able to apply whatever antidotes we need. So if we're going to be our own therapists, if we're going to have a good relationship with people, if we're going to have our lives work, and have our lives be something that's what we dream of, what we want in our heart of hearts, then we have to practice. We have to practice mindfulness. We have to practice mindfulness of these really important things. I remember Geshe Lundrup Sopa. He was one of Lama Yeshe's. He was in Madison, Wisconsin for many years, many decades. And he was a teacher for a lot of great students. And I got to know him pretty well, not very well, but I got to know him. And I remember I was coming back to Raleigh, to Gadampa Center, and I said, I'd like to, we don't have very many students, and I'm wondering can you give me a little bit of coaching on how to talk about the Dharma in a way that will interest people so they'll want to practice. And he said something very interesting. He said, practicing the Dharma is the way to make all of your dreams come true. Practicing the Dharma is the way to make all of your dreams come true. And I'm going to say dreams that are virtuous dreams, that are positive dreams, like to become, more compassionate, happier, joyful, more of, being able to make a difference in the world, make a contribution. Those are the kinds of dreams that I think he was talking about. And so just, our daily practice, getting to know our mind, recognizing those mental factors or aspects of our awareness that are destructive and interrupting them if we can, and then cultivating positive states of mind. I mean, what could be more beneficial than that? So I'm rambling. Next week, I want to go over the 8 verses of mind training. I'm going to read something before I do. These are some notes that I took on a teaching on the 8 verses of mind training. Maybe I'm going to say, it's been a long time, like 25 years ago, maybe. Anyway, or even longer. So, and this is kind of summarizing the 8 verses, which we'll go over next week. It says, but again, it's also relevant to what we're talking about. If you want happiness in this life, the only possible way is by serving others. Serve even those that attack you. Devote your life to giving others what they want and need. Reality is constructed that way. You have to think about that one. Reality is constructed that way. The wisdom of emptiness or reality makes this the only logical choice. We'll talk about that next week a little bit more. We need to reach the point in our personal spiritual practice where we focus on others' good qualities. In reality, they're swimming in good qualities. This is the first step in taking care of others. Create a special relationship with people who are nasty to you. One good enemy at work is more precious than the Dalai Lama for you. We will learn more from adversity than 10 days of teachings from the Dalai Lama. Look at the people you live with as your ticket to enlightenment in that same light, because the people we live with are going to challenge us. And they're not always going to be easy to live with either. If we cannot get rid of the habit of taking care, if you cannot get rid of the habit of taking care of yourself first above what others need, you won't succeed in achieving happiness. But that's big. Let me say that again. If you cannot get rid of the habit of taking care of yourself first above what others need, you won't succeed in achieving happiness. Anytime you have a relationship with someone else, they should come out ahead. Take the loss yourself and give them the gain. To the extent that you're able to give everything you can to others, make a career of it. Now this refers to like the fifth verse. Those of you who know the 8 verses of mind training, it's the most controversial verse in the text, but it's very powerful. So I'll read it again. At anytime you have a relationship with someone else, they should come out ahead. Offer the victory to others. Take the loss yourself and give them all the gain. To the extent that you're able to give everything you can, let me say it this way, to the extent that you're able to give everything you can to others, make a career of it. Just decide that you're going to be last in line, always last. Try it. This practice can immediately make you happy. Try it for 10% of the day today or tomorrow. So I went through the notes of this teaching and wrote that little 1-page summary, and I've kept it for 25 years. I think it's wonderful. Sheila or anybody else have any questions or comments? I'd be interested if anything came up or needs clarification. I'm happy to try to do that.
I think next week I would like to hear about what you did to focus your attention on the Dharma, and because that's where I'm fighting. I'm fighting on my focus, and I'm fighting with, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, it's I don't know. I'm still working on it, Samsara is like a magnet, I mean, it's, the pleasures. I'll tell you something that a teaching that I really enjoy. It's again, it has to do with the self-cherishing mind, but it's called the 8 Worldly Dharmas. Are you familiar? I'm sure you've heard of it. But the 8 worldly concerns, 8 worldly dharmas. But there was a Thai monk. His name was Ajahn Buddhadasa, a Buddhadasa bhikkhu. He lived in central Thailand, and I did some practices one time, tried to anyway, at his monastery. And he was wonderful. And he said, we're all addicted to deliciousness. What we want, what we crave and cling to are these things that are all, are all the good, all we want is the good stuff. And all we want to avoid is the opposite of the good stuff. Like, we always talk about pleasure, gain, fame, and praise. It's kind of there's just 4 of them, but they sort of summarize all the good stuff. And then their opposites would be pain and loss and disgrace and blame. So we cling to having the delicious things in life, and we also cling or crave or feel aversion toward their opposites. But in fact, they're all part of life, isn't it? Yes, we'll get some things and we'll lose some things, and we're going to have it all. And yet, if we are constantly craving, even when we don't have, even when we're sort of in the middle, we're not at peace. The mind is never at peace. We're always kind of lost. And Lama Zopa has said this many times, and I can, everybody, I think, if they look at their experience, can vouch for it. The worst suffering in all of samsara, it's not getting thrown into a cauldron of boiling lava. It's, or having your body, whatever the hell realms look like. Dante's Inferno. it's the dissatisfied mind. It's like low-level radiation. It's like we're never, ever satisfied. It's never good enough. We're not good enough. Our pleasures are not good enough. They don't last long enough, and so on and so on. And so we have to recognize how that attitude is driving us, is sort of is propelling us through our lives. And then all of a sudden, the life's over, and we spend our whole lives in pursuit of delicious things and to get away from things that are, not pleasant. And yet what we really in our heart of hearts want is joy and peace and satisfaction. And I think getting to the point where one has conviction that the Dharma actually can deliver on our dreams for joy and peace and satisfaction. That's something I really will always be aspiring to. I haven't said I got there yet, but I can see the value of it, and it's definitely kept me plugged in for 40 years. So, not that I'm still an advanced beginner. I'll say that. So let's do the dedication verses, and we can wrap it up. So Shayla, can you put those up, please? All right. So again, merit is like, it's just positive karma, isn't it? Merit is like, sounds like merit badges, like in Boy Scouts, but it's just these karmic seeds that we planted in this last hour that, because our motivation's been positive, it's been virtuous, it will bring happiness in the future. Absolutely. It's impossible for positive karma to result in anything but happiness. So we want these merits these meritorious karmic seeds to ultimately ripen in our ability to become a Buddha and to be able to help others. We don't want those seeds to ripen. It's okay, if we don't dedicate the merit, they might ripen in a new Tesla, or like a vacation to Paris, but it won't give you. But this is where we give the merit direction, so it won't get lost. It'll go into that pot that of merit that ultimately is the cause for us to achieve full enlightenment. So we need to think about that when we do the dedication. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception to that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Amen. All right. Well, thank you. Shayla, I know you're the only one there, but maybe somebody else will plug in.
No,
and
Daddy's here too.
Pardon?
Oh, your screen, Danny's here. So
I'm here, so you can't discount me.
Told you.
There's always Danny.
Okay, well, I can only see myself. I can't see anybody else.
Well,
so
then you better get over it then.
I know.
Uh-huh.
If you click on the 3 dots in the corner of your frame, that will change you to you can it will give you, oh no, I'm sorry, it's the top right hand corner that says view. You change that to gallery, then you can see everybody.
Hang on a minute. Well, here's switch to gallery view.
Yes,
I see that.
Me.
That's it.
There I am.
Hey.
Thank you, kind sir.
All right. So
Thank you.
I have one more thing to say. This is
Nice
very, very cool. Very cool. last Sunday in the Wall Street Journal, there was a great article, and there was a Harvard study that's been going on for 85 years on, what made people happy and gave them satisfaction and, or health and happiness and so forth. And the thing that came up again and again and again were relationships. Relationships were the thing that were enable the vast majority of these people whose lives worked to have happiness and joy. And so, what is the Dharma about other than relationships, isn't it? Cherishing others. It's about good relationships, not just relationships, but good relationships. So they're not contradictory at all. So have a great week, everyone, and thank you. Stay warm, Sheila.
Well, I